Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel, Hezbollah. Oh, here it is. Let's talk. Let's tune into Brandon.
To bring a conflict between Israel and Hezbollah to a close. Under the deal reached today, effective at 4 a.m. tomorrow local time, the fighting across the Lebanese-Israeli border will end. Will end. This is designed to be a permanent cessation of hostilities. What is left of Hezbollah and other terrorist organizations will not be allowed, well, I emphasize, will not be allowed to threaten the security of Israel again. Over the next 60 days, the Lebanese army and state security forces will deploy and take control of their own territory once again. Hezbollah terrorist infrastructure in southern Lebanon will not be allowed to be rebuilt. And over the next 60 days, Israel will gradually withdraw its remaining forces. And civilians on both sides will soon be able to safely return to their communities and begin to rebuild their homes, their schools, their farms, their businesses, and their very lives. We're determined this conflict will not be just another cycle of violence. And so the United States, with the full support of France and our other allies, has pledged to work with Israel and Lebanon to ensure that this arrangement is fully implemented, the agreement totally implemented. You know, there will be no U.S. troops deployed in southern Lebanon. This is consistent with my commitment to the American people to not put U.S. troops in combat in this conflict. Instead, we, along with France and others, will provide the necessary assistance to make sure this deal is implemented fully.
It's so funny to be like, I'm proud to issue a ceasefire in Lebanon that I basically allowed to thrive by giving unlimited weapons to Israel that decided to also invade Lebanon.
Just like any country, when facing a terrorist group pledged to that country's destruction. At the same time, this deal supports Lebanon's sovereignty, and so it heralds a new start for Lebanon, a country that I've seen most of over the years, a country with rich history and culture. If fully implemented, this deal can put Lebanon on a path toward a future that's worthy of its significant past. And just as the Lebanese people deserve a future of security and prosperity,
Brandon's trying to save his reputation. He'll never save his reputation.
They too deserve an end to the fighting and displacement. The people of Gaza have been through hell. Their world's absolutely shattered. Far too many civilians in Gaza have suffered, far too much.
It's all because of Hamas.
Refused for months and months to negotiate a good faith ceasefire and a hostage deal. And so now Hamas has a choice to make. Their only way out is to release the hostages, including American citizens, which they hold. And in the process, bring an end to the fighting, which would make possible a surge of humanitarian relief. Over the coming days, the United States will make another push with Turkey, Egypt, Qatar, Israel, and others to achieve a ceasefire in Gaza. With the hostages released and the end of the war without Hamas in power, that becomes possible. As for the broader Middle East region, today's announcement brings us closer to realizing the affirmative agenda that I've been pushing forward during my entire presidency. A vision for the future of the Middle East where it's at peace and prosperous and integrated across borders. A future where Palestinians have a state of their own, one that fulfills its people's legitimate aspirations, one that cannot threaten Israel.
Why is it that he can broker this peace with Israel? Oh, it's because Hezbollah actually made Israel suffer a tremendous amount of casualties in its invasion part of the process. Israel bombed Beirut into oblivion, as they do, and then when they brought in their ground troops, they got their shit pushed in over and over and over again, so much so that there was like talks of potential mutiny and unrest among the ranks. And of course, Israel was way more willing to broker a ceasefire in Lebanon than they were as a direct consequence of that. Okay? Once again, Israel showing the world, just like it did time and time again with Lebanon, specifically with Hezbollah throughout its evolution, throughout its history, that you know, they will only respond to force. Now, the other side of this process is that if they actually have succeeded in the ceasefire, that means that they have successfully decoupled Hezbollah from their ethnic cleansing in Gaza, right? And that is the other side of this process. And it's obvious that Joe Biden is not going to do about Gaza. Okay. The ceasefire will come into effect at 4 a.m. Israel's preparing for final strikes from Lebanon in preparation for the deadline. So we shall see what happens. 95 plus soldiers killed, plus 900 soldiers injured, 42 Merkava tanks destroyed, 4 military bulldozers destroyed. Yeah, the Hezbollah as a fighting force is very different than Hamas, understandably. Okay. It is functionally the standing military of Lebanon. Lebanon has a standing military with a security cooperation agreement with the United States and Western nations, but that has only been a limit to Lebanon's own sovereignty and its own protection. That's precisely the reason why they don't have like anti-aircraft weapons and shit like that. Because if they did, then they would be using American defenses, American anti-aircraft defenses against Israeli American fighter jets that Israel is utilizing. So that is what's going on here. Once again, this is the fourth time at this point, or third time at this point, that Israel is pushed into Lebanon and then pushed out of Lebanon by force and has conceded. But then they'll say, "Oh, we got our mission across. We did it. We succeeded. What did you succeed? You killed a shit ton of Lebanese people. You blew up a ton of villages, and then that's it." Now, I do not know what happens next in this process, but in the final 48 hours before a ceasefire in 2006 war, Israel dropped internationally banned cluster munitions across South Lebanon, that still kill children who unwittingly stumble across them to this day. We've seen the scramble for a last-minute destruction on a ticking clock before. This is the updated version. IDF issues airstrike notices for central Beirut neighborhoods, including Hamra for the first time, far from the suburbs and rarely hit. Ironically, the fact that Israel is devastating Lebanon's capital today means ceasefire is likely imminent. Heavy bombardment in final hours is a common tactic. Roads jammed with civilians fleeing.
Saying that Israel has the right to defend itself even after this ceasefire, and that at the same time the US supports Lebanon's sovereignty. We did hear from Prime Minister Netanyahu just a few hours ago, before a full vote of the Israeli cabinet, saying that he recommended this ceasefire, but also saying that Israel has the right to open fire again on Hezbollah, even if, for example, it begins to build tunnels again. So Prime Minister Netanyahu, and I think you heard President Biden there too, trying to reassure a skeptical Israeli people that this will not lead to the return of Hezbollah in years to come. Prime Minister Netanyahu talked about that Hezbollah had been defeated for decades. But has it been fully defeated? No, it has not. Many of its leaders have been killed. Many people have been killed. Another question, too, will those tens of thousands of Israelis in the north be able to return to their homes? There are many in those communities who think.
New over 100 prominent Jewish Georgians, including rabbis, board members of the ADL, and cultural leaders, signed on to a letter supporting Ossoff and Warnock's vote against some Israeli arms sales. It's time to stop treating Jews as a monolith. Oh, look at that. Look at that. Oh, wow. I am shocked. It turns out that a lot of these American Jewish institutions were speaking out of turn, not necessarily caring about their, Jewish constituents and their interests and their needs. How shocking. How shocking. They've penned an open letter praising Georgia's Democratic Senators Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock for their votes in support of a series of resolutions disapproving the sales of some arms systems to the Israeli government. Look at that. Hasan, bring up only the most biased article ever, only to read the headline piker. I love that I'm currently in the process. It is simply just, an article, okay? That's just what this is, okay? And I'm currently in the process of reading it, but you're so delusional that you can't even capture what is happening in front of your eyes. What? Annoying. What is happening? The letter, which I have posted in full below, is signed by people involved in Jewish community life across metro Atlanta area, from synagogues to Jewish day schools to the Anti-Defamation League. It thanks the senators for their courage in voting the way they did, concluding that their votes help promote regional stability and peace. It comes days after around 50 Jewish organizations signed a letter organized by the Jewish Federation of Greater Atlanta and backed by some powerful American Israel Affairs public. What? Hold on. I'm trying to do something. Oh, okay. The dueling letters demonstrate an important debate within the local Jewish community that reflects broader national trends. For decades, the image of Jewish America was one of a monolith. Politicians treated the Jewish community as if it was united in support of unconditional military aid and diplomatic support for the Israeli government, no matter who was running it and no matter what policies it pursued. But in recent years, it has become clear that the Jewish community is no more monolith than any other one. No shit. Rabbi Mike Rothbaum with Israeli Maoz Inon, whose parents were killed during the October 7th attack. The signatories this week's letter and other Jewish Georgians opposed to the Federation letter made clear to me in interviews that they see no contradiction between supporting Israel and limiting the flow of some offensive weapons to its government to help bring about an end to the conflict. Rabbi Mike Rothbaum, yeah, but make no mistake, by the way, this doesn't mean that these are card-carrying anti-Zionists, okay? That doesn't mean that at all. And that doesn't mean that for John Ossoff either. But the idea that all of these American Jewish institutions that are so predisposed, so openly with defending Israel so unconditionally is reflective of the broader attitude of American Jews is wrong. Okay? It's wrong. It's ridiculous. It's like the woke version of dual loyalty tropes. Anyway, even though Israel's claiming that they have beat Hezbollah, they're just lying. But then what happens when the Lebanese military tries to take control of Hezbollah-controlled territory? I don't know what will happen internally in Lebanon, and I do hope that there is no civil war, like Civil War 2.0. You know what I mean? Probably not, though, but we'll see. But let's get back to the Lebanese ceasefire and where we're at with the Lebanese ceasefire. Okay, starting first with
security correspondent Frank Gardner, who is there for us, I think. Frank Gardner, can you just bring us up to date on the latest from the Israeli Prime Minister and exactly what he was saying in that address? He spoke like he was recommending a ceasefire deal and said that he would be putting it to his cabinet.
Yeah, you could be forgiven, Ben, for thinking that this is pretty opaque and confusing. And believe me, I've been struggling to understand, has the Security Cabinet approved this thing or not? And the answer is that he has recommended it, it's expected to be approved, and he will present it tomorrow to the full Cabinet, and it's expected to pass. But can I give you a definitive answer that it has definitely, absolutely passed the Security Cabinet? I have not seen that in writing. But then again, I've been stuck in the studio. So I think the signs are that Israel is approving or about to fully approve within the coming hours this ceasefire deal. There is enormous momentum here from the United States. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who has spent part of the last hour endorsing the reasons why this deal should go ahead. He's been recounting all the ways in which Israel has degraded the military capabilities of its enemies, both in Gaza, in Yemen, in Lebanon, in Iran, and Iraq and Syria. And he said that the Hezbollah, which attacked us from October the 8th onwards, his words, is not the same as the force it is today. Now, all of that, I think, is going to come as little consolation to those people in the north of Israel who have been saying they don't think Hezbollah has been sufficiently degraded, despite the enormous airstrikes that we have seen in the last 24 hours going into Beirut and in the days before that, with a lot of civilians killed there. Despite all of the damage to Lebanon, there are people in the north of this country and Itamar Ben-Gvir, the security minister, who have said that they want to see this war prosecuted further and longer. But anyhow, it doesn't look like they're going to get their way. It looks like the ceasefire deal is going to go ahead, which is 60 days, a kind of trial 60 days, 2 months, during which the Israeli army will withdraw in stages from Lebanon, from the south of Lebanon, where it's been active. Hezbollah will withdraw north of the Litani River, 30 kilometers north of the Lebanon border, and the security vacuum will be backfilled by a bolstered Lebanese National Army and troops from UNIFIL, that's the United Nations interim force in Lebanon. But critically for Israel, the reason why I think he's been able to pass this, to get this deal through the Security Cabinet, or at least get their backing for it, even if they haven't actually physically signed off on it yet. The reason that Israel's been
yes, this is an earlier coverage from an hour ago, but it just got signed.
Relatively comfortable with this is because it reserves the right to go back into Lebanon with presumably airstrikes or ground forces if it detects that there is an imminent military threat from Hezbollah. That was something that was a sticking point, but they've managed to get that past people on the Lebanon side of it. So it looks like the deal is going ahead.
Tonight, I will bring before the cabinet a plan for a ceasefire in Lebanon. The duration of the ceasefire depends on what happens in Lebanon. We have an understanding with the United States. We are maintaining our full liberty to take military operations. If Hezbollah tries to attack us, if it arms itself, if it rebuilds infrastructure next to the borders, we will attack them. If they launch missiles, if they dig tunnels, we will attack. Yes, I can hear people saying that if we start a ceasefire, we will not be able to attack, we will not be able to resume the war. Let me remind you, this is exactly what people said to me when we entered into the ceasefire in Gaza, in which we released our hostages. People said we would not risk fighting, but we did. And how? People say to me, well, Hezbollah will lay low for a year or two, will rearm itself, and then it will attack us. But Hezbollah will commit a breach of the agreement not only when they fire at us, but even when they try to rearm themselves. For any such breach, we will react very forcefully. I know there are those who don't believe we will do that, but many didn't believe that we would enter with ground forces into Gaza, and we did. People didn't believe that we'll enter into Shifa and Khan Yunis, and we did. People didn't believe that, faced with immense international pressure, we would enter into Rafah and the Philadelphia corridor. Not only did we enter these places, we attacked them. And how? There were many people who...
I mean, he's bragging about it. He's trying to reassure Israelis who still want more blood. Don't worry, we will go back if they do anything. Yeah. He's trying to make the most of the situation, you know? Israeli media really hated this speech, by the way. Yeah, I don't think you guys understand. There is a lot of appetite, I think, in Israel for just endless violence. Okay? It is what it is. CNN is covering it live right now. Let's hear what they have to say. No, they're talking about Trump tariffs.
Will be passed on to you. Which products maybe hit the hardest?
We're gonna be doing this.
Expected to be the busiest day for air traffic of the Thanksgiving.
We're doing tariff coverage in a little bit.
Who didn't believe that we would ever attack in Lebanon, and we attacked there too. We attacked there very forcefully in a huge sophistication that took everybody in the world by surprise. So after all of that, maybe we should start believing in our determination, in our commitment to obtaining victory.
In Lebanon today, there was talk of a ceasefire, yet the sound was still of war. As the Israeli Security Cabinet met to discuss an agreement to end the fighting, the Israeli Defense Forces launched a massive wave of strikes right across Lebanon. With more than 10 dead and the dust still settling, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called on his cabinet to approve the ceasefire deal. Speaking this evening, he said Israel had set Hezbollah back decades and that a ceasefire now means they can focus on the Iranian threat. There had been a marked ratcheting up in attacks in recent days, with more than 30 killed in Lebanon from Israeli strikes on Monday. And yet this could be the last of the devastation and destruction, at least for now, and at least in this pocket of the Middle East. Hezbollah began firing into Israel following Hamas's attack of October the 7th and Israel's subsequent assault of Gaza, a show of solidarity among the two Iran-backed groups. The tit-for-tat exchange of missiles lasted nearly a year and led to around 60,000 Israeli citizens having to leave their homes in the north. It was this that Israel gave as its reason for escalating. In September, they assassinated Hezbollah's leader Hasan Nasrallah in a massive strike in Beirut, and days later launched a ground invasion of southern Lebanon. Israel says it's now killed more than 2,000 members of Hezbollah. But the war has displaced 1.2 million Lebanese citizens, and the death toll stands at more than 3,700, many of them civilians. Now, after 13 months, a deal. Reports suggest that the ceasefire is roughly based on UN Security Council Resolution 1701, which brought to an end the last conflict between Israel and Hezbollah in 2006. The first stage of the agreement will see the withdrawal of all Israeli forces from southern Lebanon within 60 days. At the same time, Hezbollah will pull back its armed presence north of the Litani River. That's about 16 miles from the Israel-Lebanon border. The Lebanese army, along with existing UN peacekeepers, will then provide security in the buffer zone, with the US chairing a 5-country committee to monitor any infringements of the agreement. The US has also agreed to give Israel a letter of assurance that they will retain the freedom to strike Hezbollah if it poses a threat. Something vital in trying to sell this ceasefire deal to those displaced by the conflict. Most of them have spent months living in hotels like here in Haifa, and they do not believe the threat of Hezbollah has gone.
We don't feel safe, and if we finish now, it will, the weapon will stay there for the future Hezbollah people.
This is southern Lebanon today. Israel's assault has left a wasteland where once there were villages. For Netanyahu, he has successfully ravaged Hezbollah's military capabilities and killed its top leaders. But at what cost to the Lebanese people stuck in the middle, with any ceasefire potentially just a pause in a Cold War always on the edge of heating up? And what of the source of this war? Gaza, where fresh rubble lies atop more than a year's worth of constant bombardment. Talks of a ceasefire here are long forgotten, and yet the need for an end to the war is as great as the desperate clamour for food in Khan Yunis.
Well, joining me now from Beirut is Lebanese MP and former Deputy Prime Minister Hasan Hasbani. Thanks so much for coming back on the programme, Mr. Hasbani.
Trump posted Kai on his IG. Wait, what? Kai Cenat has been posted on Donald Trump's official IG doing the Trump dance? Wait, what? He wasn't even doing, was he even doing the Trump dance? That's crazy. That's crazy. I don't think that's the Trump. Trump can't even move his hips like that. Yeah, I don't believe that.
Barney, apparently the bombing is still going on in Lebanon, perhaps even in Beirut. How does it feel to be bombed into a ceasefire?
Yeah, this is basically a ceasefire under fire. These are the last hours before any potential declaration in the early hours of the morning, tomorrow morning, of an agreement. This is pretty much an agreement predominantly between Hezbollah and Israel, also covered by parts of the Lebanese government under a certain process and sponsored by the US and various other countries, hopefully that it would lead to a more permanent solution later on.
Right. So it gives you some breathing space. Is it enough to allow Lebanon, with all its incredible economic difficulties, to rebuild, to become a viable state again?
Well, the ceasefire for 2 months is more of a trial period to ensure the implementation of UN Resolution 1701 practically. And this is basically what it practically is all about. Definitely, as we've been hearing on the Lebanese side from the displaced people, as well as on the Israeli side, that people are still a bit cautious about returning home, about going back to normal life until this becomes a permanent situation. So it's a very fragile ceasefire given the conditions that have been put in place. But nevertheless, it's a practical implementation of UN Resolution 1701 that was effectively voted on almost 18 years ago after the Israeli war in 2006.
Hezbollah has been severely weakened by the Israeli onslaught of recent months. Do you welcome the fact that Hezbollah has been put into a box?
Well, we were actually hoping, and we called for, as the opposition parties in Lebanon for a peaceful implementation of UN resolutions, particularly 1701 and 1559, that call for the withdrawal from the south of the Litani River, dismantling the military capabilities and the handover of weapons to the legitimate and sovereign Lebanese armed forces to be all under the Lebanese government, sovereign government umbrella. Yet these calls were never met. Today, unfortunately, they had to be done in such difficult circumstances with such huge losses to the Lebanese people, the Lebanese economy.
Right.
And we're going back to something that was agreed upon back in 2006. So at least let's hope that something positive will come out of this, with all the unfortunate losses of lives and property and economic losses as well.
And finally and briefly, you are going to live under the constant potential threat of Israeli bombardment should Hezbollah...
All right, let's get the drop side news. Breaking. Israel's security cabinet agrees to ceasefire deal with Lebanon. Hezbollah excluded from negotiations. This is from 1048, a couple hours ago. The framework agreed, Lebanon said, is not a ceasefire, but a cessation of hostilities. There are no terms about Hezbollah disarming. Israeli drones are still buzzing in Beirut skies, where Israel is carrying out heavy bombardments. See Drop News' timeline. That also is like the buildup to a ceasefire in general. That's a part of how Israel operates. It's a part of how Hezbollah operates as well. Leading up to the final moment of ceasefire, there's going to be heavy bombardment. Okay. At least 10 people were killed in massive attacks in the Dahiyah district earlier today. Prime Minister Netanyahu, addressing the press now, says Israel maintains the right to attack militarily. We will respond forcefully to any breach of the agreement. Israel also wanted a term implemented in the ceasefire proposal where they could just legally enter Lebanon whenever they saw fit. And Hezbollah was like, no, that's not going to happen. So tonight will be the final night where, Elent News is correct. Both sides will try to score as many victories as possible, likely with large airstrikes and rocket fire. For Israel, this usually means, striking and killing as many civilians as possible. For Hezbollah, it will probably mean northern Israel be struck pretty aggressively, but I assume they'll also try to hit like military bases again. So we'll see. Deputy Chairman of Hezbollah Political Council, we must scrutinize the points Netanyahu agreed to before signing the government tomorrow. Hezbollah official adds, we doubt Netanyahu's commitment and will not allow him to pass a trap in the agreement. Since then, obviously, the ceasefire deal has been signed.
Provoke
with,
them
I think, Itamar Ben-Gvir being the only naysayer of the agreement, right? Is he the only one? Yeah, only Ynet says only Ben-Gvir objected. The cabinet finally approved the agreement. Report the ceasefire will begin at 4 a.m. So, yeah. Is it weird that Israel's enemies are always attacking military bases when Israel bombs apartment buildings? No, it's not that weird, honestly. It's just when you have a limited amount of retaliatory, when you have a much more limited inventory of weapons, like, yeah, you would probably want to undermine the military more than you would want to just like kill random civilians. Killing random civilians is what you do when you're either incredibly desperate and engaging in an act of terror as a final moment of desperation to incur penalties, to create penalties for the sovereign state when you're a non-state actor, or when you are the state actor and you can do that because you have an endless amount of weapons. If you're somewhere in between a state actor and a non-state actor like Hezbollah is, with arms within civil governance, that simultaneously operates as like the de facto standing military of Lebanon in many instances, then you have an obligation where, with a limited amount of arsenal, much better than Hamas's capabilities, of course, but you have a finite opportunity, a window of time, and a window of permissible targets that you can go after. This is something that I've mentioned before with respect to Hamas's, bathtub rockets. They lob into Israel. People will always be like, well, they're indiscriminately firing into Israel. It's like, yeah, if you give them targeting systems, I'm sure that they would utilize those. They would utilize the targeting capabilities if they had them on Israeli military bases, because those are the people that are killing Palestinians directly. So that is the reality. A senior Hezbollah official told Al Jazeera that Netanyahu cannot be trusted and they need to review the actual terms of the proposal deal. Israel is continuing to pound Lebanon with heavy strikes. Netanyahu, in his remarks tonight, reiterated that Israel reserves the right to attack Lebanon even after a deal is signed. Just because the Israeli cabinet approves something doesn't mean it's done. And both Israel and the U.S. have pushed blatantly false information in the past. Lebanon's Al-Manar TV, deputy head of Hezbollah's political counsel, Mahmoud Kamadi, we doubt Netanyahu's commitment, who has accustomed us to deception, and we will not allow him to pass a trap through the agreement. In his speech, Biden emphasized that Israel would retain the right to attack Hezbollah if it posed any threat to Israeli security, confirming Netanyahu's claim. So we shall see. We shall see what happens. But I don't know. I don't know if there is. There was a mistranslation in the quote. There's a news circulating quoting Hezbollah MP Hasan Fadlallah stating that the document released to the public is different from the real one. This is not accurate. What he said was that the document that arrived at Lebanon was different, as in changed, to the one that left Lebanon to the occupation entity, meaning Lebanon changed the conditions they did not agree to, not that a wrong document was leaked. Yeah. I'm from Haifa. We've had 2 alerts so far this evening, but honestly, I'm having a hard time taking this threat seriously, staying safe and all. I think that in the interim period leading up to this ceasefire, there will be heavy bombing back and forth, both in Beirut, in Lebanon, like Israeli bombing, and also in different parts of Israel as well. Benjamin Netanyahu just tweeted this from his personal account. Trump, Congress looking to put suffocating sanctions on kangaroo ICC over Netanyahu arrest warrant. Nice, man. Congratulations. The thing is, a lot of people in Israel, including the opposition leaders to Benjamin Netanyahu, don't want the pummeling to stop in Lebanon. There is not a lot of appetite for a ceasefire in Lebanon. There is, I would dare I say, there is more appetite to stop bombing Gaza from at least the hostage families that want to, in the interim period, have a release of the hostages. And they also understand that the only way to get that done is with a cessation of hostilities in Gaza. So, like, there are more people that want to, at the very least, like, limit and maybe even secure a ceasefire deal and simultaneously a release of the hostages than there are people who want to stop the bombing campaign in Lebanon. So it's this very weird predicament where it's this very weird situation where I think that there are, Netanyahu is doing something that is like maybe considered somewhat unpopular, which is even aesthetically leaning towards a ceasefire in Lebanon. What do you even say to the people who've been screaming to the void, getting arrested, brutalized for criticizing Israel? How do we not give up? How is it expected to keep fighting? I mean, just remember what you're fighting for. What do you mean? There are very real people, families being ripped apart, babies being shredded by American munitions. They don't have the comfort of being able to give up. So we have to do whatever we can to continue the fight. You know, that's it.